The doorbell rang at exactly 8:17 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. Not on a Friday night when I'd finally kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto the couch after the worst week I could remember. When I opened the door, there she stood. Alexandra Monroe. The woman I'd handed my resignation letter to just 3 days ago. The CEO who'd built a manufacturing empire from absolutely nothing. The boss I'd secretly been in love with for 2 years. She was soaked from the rain, holding a manila envelope in her hands, and wearing an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Vulnerable, almost scared. "I accepted your resignation letter," she said, her voice barely louder than a whisper. Raindrops slid down her face, mixing with what might have been tears. "But I never accepted losing you from my life." I stood there, frozen, my hands still on the doorknob. My brain couldn't process what was happening. This was Alexandra Monroe, the woman who commanded boardrooms full of powerful men, the CEO who made million-dollar decisions before breakfast. And she was standing at my apartment door, drenched and shaking, saying words I never thought I'd hear. "My name is James Mitchell. Let me back up and tell you how I got here. Because 6 months ago, I never would have believed this moment was possible. 6 months earlier, my life fell apart on a Tuesday afternoon. I came home from work to find a note on the kitchen counter. Rebecca, my girlfriend of 4 years, had left me. The note was short, cold. She'd met someone else at her gym. Someone more exciting, she wrote. Someone who wasn't always tired from work. Someone who actually had time for her. She'd already moved her stuff out. For years together, and she couldn't even tell me to my face. I sat on the floor of our empty bedroom that night, staring at the spaces where her furniture used to be. We talked about getting married. We'd looked at houses. We'd planned a whole future together. And she threw it away for some guy she met doing yoga classes. The next morning, I dragged myself to work at Apex Industries. I'd been there for 5 years, working my way up from a junior operations manager to senior operations manager. The company made high-tech manufacturing equipment, the kind of machines that build other machines. It was complicated work, but I loved it, or at least I used to love it. Alexandra Monroe was the founder and CEO. She'd started the company 12 years ago in a garage, just her and 2 engineers. Now we had over 300 employees and contracts with some of the biggest factories in the country. She was brilliant. Everyone said so. She could look at a factory floor and spot problems that would take other people weeks to notice. She remembered every detail of every project. And she expected everyone around her to be just as sharp. I'd always respected her, admired her even, but 2 years ago something shifted. I got promoted to director of operations, which meant I worked directly with her almost every day. We'd spend hours in her office, going over plans and solving problems. She'd bring coffee for both of us without asking how I liked it, because she'd somehow memorized that I took it black with 1 sugar. She'd laugh at my terrible jokes about factory equipment. And sometimes, late in the evening when everyone else had gone home, she'd talk about things that had nothing to do with work. Her childhood, her dreams, her fears about whether she was building something that actually mattered. Those moments made my chest feel tight, made me look forward to Monday mornings instead of dreading them, made me stay late even when I didn't have to, just hoping she might stop by my office to chat. But she was my boss, and I was in a relationship, so I buried those feelings deep down where they couldn't cause problems. When Rebecca left, I thought I'd fall apart at work. I expected to mess up projects, to lose focus, to become the kind of employee who everyone whispers about in the break room. Instead, something surprising happened. Alexandra called me into her office 2 days after the breakup. I don't know how she found out. Maybe someone saw me crying in my car in the parking lot. Maybe she just noticed I looked like I hadn't slept in a week. "I heard what happened," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it.
"I'm sorry, James."
"That's incredibly difficult." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without my voice cracking. "I'm adjusting your schedule," she continued. "You can work from home 3 days a week for as long as you need. And I'm moving your project deadlines back 2 weeks. You need space to process this."
Is Cette here?
This was Alexandra Monroe, The woman who once told a client that deadlines were sacred and anyone who missed one might as well not bother showing up to work. And here she was, rearranging major projects because my girlfriend left me. "Thank you," I managed to say. "That means more than you know." She nodded once. Quick and professional, like always. "Take care of yourself first, James. The work will still be here when you're ready." That was 6 months ago. And for 6 months, the arrangement worked. I'd go into the office Monday and Tuesday, then work from home the rest of the week. It gave me time to sort through my feelings without everyone at work watching me. Time to box up Rebecca's remaining things and donate them. Time to figure out who I was without her. Alexandra started checking in on me regularly. At first, it was just work stuff. Quick emails asking if I had the reports ready or if I needed help with anything. But then the messages got more personal. She'd ask how I was holding up, if I was eating properly, if I needed more time off. I told myself she was just being a good boss, looking out for an employee going through a hard time. That's what good leaders do, right? They care about their people. But then came the phone calls. The first one happened on a Wednesday night around 11. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop screen. I'd been trying to finish a presentation for 3 hours, but my brain felt like mud. I couldn't focus, couldn't think straight. My phone rang, and Alexandra's name lit up the screen. "Hey," she said when I answered. "I saw you were online late. Just wanted to make sure you're okay." We talked for maybe 10 minutes about the presentation I was working on. She helped me figure out a problem I'd been stuck on. Then, just as we were about to hang up, she said something that surprised me. "I read this book last week. It's about a guy who rides his motorcycle across the country after his life falls apart. Made me think of you. You mentioned once that you like motorcycles, right?" "Yeah," I said, suddenly more awake. "I've been restoring one in my building's garage. A 1978 Honda CB 750. It's been a project for years." "That sounds incredible," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Tell me about it." So I did. I told her about finding the bike at an estate sale, all rusty and broken. About spending weekends taking it apart piece by piece, cleaning every component, hunting down replacement parts. About how working with my hands helped me think. Helped me relax in a way that staring at spreadsheets never did. She listened, really listened, asked questions that showed she actually cared about the answers. That call lasted an hour and a half. We barely talked about work. After that, the late-night calls became regular. 2 or 3 times a week, my phone would ring around 10 or 11. Sometimes she'd start with a work question, but we'd always end up talking about other things. She told me about growing up in Boston with a single mom who worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. About how her mom never complained, never made her feel like they were struggling, even though they ate pasta for dinner 5 nights a week. About how that taught her to work harder than everyone else, to never expect anything to be handed to her. I told her about my dream to take that motorcycle cross-country once I finished restoring it. To see the country without a schedule or a plan. To just ride and see where I ended up. Those conversations became the best part of my day. I'd catch myself watching the clock at 9:30, wondering if she'd call. Smiling when I saw her name on my screen. Lying in bed after we hung up, replaying things she'd said. But I kept reminding myself of the reality. She was my boss. She was probably just being nice to an employee going through a rough patch. The warm feeling in my chest when she laughed at my jokes didn't mean anything. Couldn't mean anything. Then, for months after Rebecca left, everything got harder. Apex Industries announced we were merging with Sterling Manufacturing, a smaller competitor. It was a massive deal, the kind that could double our company's size. And guess who got assigned to lead the operations integration? Me. Suddenly my workload tripled. I was managing 2 teams, coordinating between different systems, trying to merge factory schedules and supply chains. I was working 14-hour days, sometimes 16. The flexible work-from-home arrangement didn't matter anymore because I was always working, always stressed, always one mistake away from disaster. I stopped sleeping properly. Started living on coffee and energy drinks. Skipped meals because I was too busy. My apartment became a mess of takeout containers and unfinished projects. The late-night calls with Alexandra stopped. Not because she stopped calling, but because I was too exhausted to have real conversations. We'd talk for 5 minutes about work problems, and then I'd have to go because another crisis needed my attention. I started making mistakes. Small ones at first. Missed emails. Forgotten follow-ups. Then bigger ones. I sent a report to the wrong client. Mixed up 2 different project timelines in a meeting. Got so confused during a presentation that I had to stop and start over. During one video conference with the Sterling team, I could barely keep my eyes open. I'd been up until 4 in the morning fixing a scheduling disaster, then had to be on the call at 8. I stumbled through my talking points, lost my train of thought twice, and gave answers that didn't make sense. Alexandra was on that call. I could see her face on my screen, but I couldn't read her expression. Was she angry? Disappointed? Worried? I didn't know, and I was too tired to figure it out. After the call ended, I sat at my desk and stared at the wall. My hands were shaking. My head hurt. My chest felt tight, like someone was sitting on it. This isn't sustainable, I thought. I can't keep doing this. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I thought about Rebecca's note, about how she'd said I was always too tired for her, too focused on work, never had time for the things that mattered. At the time, I thought she was wrong, thought she was just making excuses, but now I wondered if she'd been right. Not about leaving me for someone else. That part was still cruel, but about me losing myself in work. About forgetting there was supposed to be more to life than projects and deadlines and proving myself. I thought about my motorcycle sitting in the garage, still half finished because I never had time to work on it anymore. About the cross-country trip I'd been dreaming of for years but kept putting off. About the books on my shelf I'd bought but never read. About friends I'd stopped calling back because I was too busy. What am I doing? I asked myself. What's the point of any of this? I got out of bed and opened my laptop. My hands moved almost automatically, typing words I'd been thinking about for weeks, but hadn't had the courage to say out loud. I wrote my resignation letter at 2 in the morning. Took me an hour to get the words right. Professional but honest. Grateful but firm. When I finished, I read it over 3 times. My finger hovered over the delete button. This was a huge decision. Walking away from a good job, a good salary, a career I'd spent years building. But I thought about that video call again. About how empty I'd felt. About how I couldn't remember the last time I'd done something just because I wanted to, not because I had to. I saved the letter and closed my laptop. Tomorrow I talk to Alexandra. Tomorrow I choose myself for once. I requested a meeting with Alexandra first thing in the morning. Her assistant looked surprised but put me on the schedule for 9. I spent the hour before pacing my apartment, rehearsing what I'd say, then forgetting it all. When I walked into her office, the city skyline stretched out behind her like she owned it. Maybe she did, in a way. She looked up from her computer, her copper-red hair perfectly styled, her expression focused and professional. "James, what can I do for you?" I placed the envelope on her desk before I could lose my nerve. "My resignation, effective in 2 weeks. I'm sorry, Alexandra, but I can't do this anymore." She stared at the envelope like it might catch fire. She didn't touch it. What happened? Did something occur that I'm not aware of? No, nothing like that. I took a breath. This isn't about the company. It's not about you. It's about me.
I'm exhausted.
I'm making mistakes. I can't maintain this pace without losing myself completely. Something crossed her face then. Not anger. Something softer, more complicated. "We can adjust your workload. I can hire 2 more people for your team by next week." "It's not about the workload," I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "It's about needing to step away. Completely. I need to figure out what I actually want from my life, and I can't do that while I'm here." She was quiet for a long moment. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic from the streets below. "Have you accepted another position?"
No.
"I don't have anything lined up. I just know I need to leave." She finally picked up the envelope, holding it carefully like it might break. You're one of the best people I've ever worked with, James. Losing you will hurt this company. It will hurt me personally. I didn't know what to say to that. Thank you didn't seem right. I'm sorry felt inadequate. But I understand, she continued, her voice quieter now. Your well-being has to come first. I should have seen you were struggling. I should have done something sooner. You did everything you could. I told her, and I meant it. You gave me space when I needed it. You adjusted my schedule. This isn't on you. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for just a second I saw something in her eyes that made my chest tight. But then it was gone, replaced by her usual professional calm. We'll miss you. I'll miss you. I'll miss this place too, I admitted. And I'll miss working with you. I turned toward the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought she might hear it. My hand was on the handle when she called my name. James. I looked back. She was standing now, the envelope still in her hand, and for that brief moment she looked like she wanted to say something important. Something that had nothing to do with work or resignations or 2-week notices. Yes. But whatever it was stayed locked behind her professional mask. Good luck with everything. I hope you find what you're looking for. Thank you, I said, and walked out before I could say anything else. The next 2 weeks were strange. I had exit interviews with HR. I trained my replacement, a sharp young guy who asked a million questions. I organized my files and wrote detailed notes about ongoing projects. People stopped by my desk to say goodbye and wish me well. But Alexandra never did. I saw her in meetings, always perfectly put together, always focused on business. She never pulled me aside, never sent me an email that wasn't about work. Her assistant came to collect my laptop and access badge on my final afternoon. Not Alexandra herself, just her assistant with a polite smile and a company exit packet. I told myself it was better this way. Clean, professional, no messy emotions or awkward conversations. But as I walked out of the Apex building for the last time, carrying a small box of personal items, I couldn't shake the feeling that something important had been left unsaid. 3 days later, on Friday night at exactly 8:17 p.m., my doorbell rang. I was on the couch in sweatpants and an old college shirt, halfway through a movie I wasn't really watching. I'd ordered pizza an hour ago, so I assumed it was finally here. I grabbed my wallet and opened the door without checking the peephole. Alexandra Monroe stood on my doorstep. She was soaked from the rain, her white shirt wet from water, her copper-red hair pulled back but with wet strands escaping around her face. She held a manila envelope against her chest like a shield. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I just stared at her, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My CEO, my former CEO, at my apartment, at night, in the rain. I accepted your resignation letter, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. But I never accepted losing you from my life. I must have looked like an idiot, standing there with my mouth half open, wallet still in my hand. She looked different, not just wet, but nervous. I'd never seen Alexandra nervous before. Confident, yes. Angry occasionally. Focused always, but never nervous. Can I come in? She asked when I didn't say anything. I stepped aside on autopilot. She walked past me into my apartment, and I suddenly saw it through her eyes. Empty takeout containers on the coffee table. A pile of laundry on the chair I kept meaning to fold. My motorcycle parts spread across newspapers on the floor because I'd been trying to rebuild a carburetor. The place was a disaster. Sorry about the mess, I managed. I wasn't expecting company. She turned to face me, still holding that envelope. I've never done this before. Never shown up at someone's home unannounced. Never crossed this line. I'm not your employee anymore, I pointed out, finding my voice. So technically there's no line to cross. Exactly. She took a breath. That's exactly why I'm here. She held out the envelope to me. I took it, confused, and pulled out the papers inside. It was a job proposal. Detailed. Professional. Completely unexpected. The position was called Wellness Program Director. Fully remote. Flexible hours. The job description talked about developing mental health resources and work-life balance initiatives for all Apex employees. The salary was generous. Really generous. You created a position for me? I asked, looking up from the papers. For you, and for everyone else who might need it. She was watching my face carefully. You understand what it's like to burn out. You know what employees need because you lived it. You'd be perfect for this role. I didn't know what to say. It was thoughtful. Incredibly thoughtful. But something about it didn't make sense. Alexandra, you could have emailed this to me. Why are you here? She looked down at her hands, then back up at me. Because this isn't just about the job. I could have sent an email. I could have had HR reach out to you next week. But I needed to come here myself because I needed you to understand something. Understand what? She took a step closer. Those late-night phone calls we had over the past 6 months. When we talk about books and life and dreams. Those became the best part of my day. The only part of my day that felt real. My heart started beating faster. Alexandra, what are you saying? I'm saying that when you handed me that resignation letter, when I realized those conversations would end, that I wouldn't hear your voice or your laugh or your thoughts on things anymore, I couldn't accept it. She shook her head. I told myself it was inappropriate. You were my employee. You were going through a hard time with your breakup. I was your boss. There were 1,000 reasons why I couldn't tell you how I felt. How you felt? I repeated quietly. Feel, she corrected. Present tense. She looked me right in the eyes. I spent 3 days trying to talk myself out of coming here. I drove past your building twice tonight before I finally parked. This is terrifying for me, James. I've built my entire life on being professional, on maintaining boundaries, on keeping my personal feelings separate from business. But when you resigned, something broke in me. I realized that all those rules I'd followed, all those walls I'd built, they were keeping me from something that actually mattered. And what's that? I asked, even though I thought I knew. I needed to hear her say it. You. She said it simply, clearly. You matter to me, not as an employee, not as a colleague, as someone I haven't been able to stop thinking about, as someone who makes me laugh when I'm stressed and challenges me when I'm being too rigid and sees me as a person instead of just a CEO. I set the envelope down on the arm of the couch. I'd imagined this moment, late at night when I couldn't sleep. I'd imagined what I might say if somehow, impossibly, Alexandra felt the same way I did. But now that it was happening, all my prepared words disappeared. I thought about you too, I admitted. During those calls, after those calls, I'd hang up and sit there in the dark for an hour just replaying our conversation. I told myself it was stupid. You were my boss. I was a mess. It couldn't happen. But you're not my boss anymore, she said softly. No, I agreed. I'm not. So maybe it could happen now. Maybe we could figure out what this is. She gestured between us. If you want to. I looked at her standing in my messy apartment, her expensive shirt dripping rainwater onto my cheap carpet, her carefully built professional armor cracked open enough for me to see the uncertainty underneath. Alexandra Monroe, who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions without blinking, was standing here nervous and vulnerable, taking the biggest risk of her life. I want to, I said. I really want to, but I need to understand something first. Anything. Why now? Why show up here tonight instead of last week when I was still working for you? Because I couldn't complicate your decision. She said it like it was obvious. You needed to resign. You needed to choose yourself. If I told you how I felt while you were still my employee, it would have made everything harder. It might have made you stay for the wrong reasons or leave feeling confused and hurt. I couldn't do that to you. So you waited. I waited until there was no power imbalance. Until you were free to say yes or no without worrying about your job or what it might mean for your career. She took another step closer. I'm not here as your former boss, James. I'm here as a woman who can't stop thinking about someone with a kind heart and a brilliant mind who finally chose himself when it mattered most. Before I could find words to respond, my phone buzzed loudly on the coffee table. The screen lit up with my brother's name. He'd been checking in almost every day since the breakup, worried about me, The sound shattered the moment between us. Alexandra stepped back quickly, her professional mask starting to slide back into place. "I should go," she said. "This was a mistake. I'm sorry for showing up like this."
No.
The word came out stronger than I expected. I grabbed the phone and silenced it without looking. "Stay, please." She hesitated, her hand already on the doorknob. "Why?" "Because I want you to," I said simply. "Because I've been replaying every one of those late-night calls in my head for 3 days. Because when I opened the door tonight and saw you standing there, it felt like I could breathe properly for the first time since I left Apex." Her hand dropped from the door. She turned back to face me, and I saw something raw in her expression. Something vulnerable that the powerful CEO never let anyone see. "I've been sitting in my car outside your building for 40 minutes, she admitted. "I drove past twice yesterday, once the day before that. I kept telling myself this was inappropriate, that I was your boss, that you just went through a breakup and the last thing you needed was this complication. But," I prompted, "but I couldn't stop thinking about you." She laughed, but it sounded shaky. "Do you know how many board meetings I've sat through in the past 3 days where I had no idea what anyone was saying because I was thinking about you? How many times I picked up the phone to call you and remembered I didn't have that right anymore? I crossed the small distance between us. You have that right. I'm not your employee. I'm just me. And you're not my boss. You're just you." "Just me" is terrifying, she whispered. "I'm not good at this, James. I built a company because companies make sense. They have rules and structures and logic. This doesn't make sense." "It doesn't have to make sense," I said. "Sometimes the best things don't." We stood there for a long moment, and I could hear the rain picking up again outside, drumming against the windows. "Come sit down," I finally said. "Let me make some coffee. We can just talk. Like we used to." She nodded and followed me into my small kitchen. I pulled out 2 mugs while she leaned against the counter, watching me. "Your apartment is nice," she said, though we both knew it was a lie. The place was a mess, and it was barely 800 square feet. "It's honest," I replied, measuring out coffee grounds. "No pretending here." She smiled at that, a real smile. "I like honest." As the coffee brewed, she looked around at the motorcycle magazines stacked on the counter, the half-finished model bike on the kitchen table. "You're still working on these?" she observed. "It helps me think," I explained. "When everything with Rebecca fell apart, I couldn't focus on anything. But I could work on these little pieces, put them together one at a time. It reminded me that broken things can be fixed if you're patient enough." "Is that what you think you are?" she asked quietly. "Broken?" I considered the question while pouring coffee into both mugs. "I was. Maybe I still am in some ways. But I'm working on it." I handed her a mug, and our fingers brushed. Neither of us pulled away. She took a sip, then looked at me over the rim. "I've been afraid," she admitted. "Afraid of what?" "Of this. Of caring about someone this much. Of what it means if I'm wrong about you, about us. Of what it means if I'm right." I set my mug down and took hers from her hands, placing it beside mine. Then I reached for her hand. "You drove past my building twice," I said. "You sat in your car for 40 minutes. You came to my door in the rain. That doesn't sound like someone who's unsure. It sounds like someone who's brave." "I'm not brave," she said, but she didn't pull her hand away. "You're the bravest person I know," I told her. "You built something from nothing. You took a chance on a broken operations manager and gave him space to heal. You're standing here now being honest about how you feel. That takes more courage than anything." She looked down at our joined hands. "I almost told you that day in my office, when you resigned. I wanted to ask you to stay, not for Apex, but for me. But you were already carrying so much. I couldn't add my feelings to that weight. I needed to leave," I said. "Not because of you. Because I'd lost myself somewhere in the work and the heartbreak and the trying to prove I was okay when I wasn't. But those calls we had, Alexandra, those were the only times I felt like myself. Like I could be honest about struggling. Like someone saw me, not just what I could produce." She squeezed my hand. I saw you, James. I see you. What happens now? I asked, echoing the question that had been spinning in my mind since she appeared at my door. She looked up at me, and in her eyes I saw the same hope and fear I felt. That depends on what you want, on whether you think there's room in your life for this, for us, for whatever this might become. I don't know what it will look like, I admitted. I just know that when you showed up tonight, something shifted. Like a door I didn't know was closed suddenly opened. She moved closer, close enough that I could see the rain still glistening in her hair. I've spent my whole life planning everything. 5-year strategies, growth projections, risk assessments. But this? I can't plan this. Maybe that's the point, I said softly. Maybe the best things can't be planned. She smiled then, really smiled, and it transformed her face completely. The CEO disappeared. The intimidating boss who commanded boardrooms vanished. What remained was just Alexandra, looking at me like I was something precious. I built a company by turning ideas into reality, she said. Maybe we could figure this one out together. One step at a time? I suggested. She nodded. Starting with dinner tomorrow night. Just us. No business talk. No pressure. Just 2 people getting to know each other without all the complications. I grinned. We've been talking for months. I think we already know each other pretty well. Do we? She challenged, her eyes sparkling. Tell me something I don't know about you. I thought for a moment. I'm terrified of this, I admitted. Of us. Of how much I want this to work. Of messing it up somehow. She reached up and touched my face gently. Me too. But being terrified means it matters. And maybe that's exactly why we should try. I leaned down and kissed her then. Soft and brief, just a brush of lips, but it felt like a promise. Like standing at the edge of something vast and unknown and choosing to step forward anyway. When I pulled back, she kept her eyes closed for a moment longer, and when she opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. Tomorrow night, she said. 7 o'clock. I'll pick you up. It's a date, I said, and we both laughed at the strangeness of it. After everything, after months of late-night calls and unspoken feelings, it all came down to something as simple as a date. At the door, she paused and turned back. Thank you, she said. For what? For opening the door. For asking me to stay. For being brave enough to want this even though you're scared. We both are, I reminded her. Yes, she agreed. But we're doing it anyway. After she left, I stood at the window and watched her walk to her car. She looked up before getting in, caught me watching, and waved. I waved back, feeling lighter than I had in months. That night marked the beginning. Dinner the next evening turned into a long walk through the city, talking until the restaurants closed and the streets grew quiet. We discovered we both loved old bookstores and terrible action movies. She told me about the first business she tried to start at 23 that failed spectacularly. I told her about the motorcycle accident I'd had at 19 that left me with a scar on my left shoulder and a healthy respect for safety gear. We didn't rush. We took it slow, careful with each other's hearts. Coffee dates that stretched into afternoons. Weekend hikes where we'd talk about everything and nothing. She came to my apartment and I went to hers. A stunning place downtown that somehow felt lonely despite its size. 3 weeks after that rainy night, I officially accepted the wellness director position. Walking back into Apex felt strange at first, but Alexandra and I kept things professional at work. We had to. The company had strict policies about relationships, especially involving executives. But everyone knew anyway. People aren't blind, and the way we looked at each other probably gave us away. 2 months in, we faced our first real test. A board member questioned whether my new position was just favoritism, whether I was actually qualified or if I'd been hired because of my relationship with Alexandra. The accusation stung, made worse because part of me wondered if it was true. Alexandra called an emergency board meeting. I wasn't there, but she told me about it later. She'd presented every qualification I had, every idea I'd already implemented, the preliminary data showing improved employee satisfaction. Then she'd said something that became legendary at Apex. James Mitchell earned this position through his experience and insight, My personal feelings for him are separate from his professional value. If anyone questions his competence again, they're questioning my judgment, and I invite them to review my track record of hiring decisions. No one questioned it after that. The programs I developed started showing real results. Employee burnout decreased by 30% in the first quarter. Turnover dropped. Productivity actually increased because people weren't working themselves into the ground. Other companies started calling, asking about our model. Alexandra implemented mandatory work-life balance policies company-wide. No emails after 7 p.m. unless it was an emergency. Required vacation time. Mental health days that didn't count against sick leave. Your well-being comes first became more than a nice phrase. It became how Apex operated. For months after that rainy night, we took a trip together. 2 weeks on motorcycles riding through mountain passes and desert highways. No schedule, no destination in mind, just the road and each other. One night, camped under stars so bright they looked fake. Alexandra told me she loved me. I'd been waiting to hear those words, but I'd been too afraid to say them first. I love you too, I said, and meant it with everything in me. 6 months after she'd shown up at my door, I moved into a better apartment. Alexandra helped me pack, laughing at my collection of motorcycle magazines and the ridiculous number of coffee mugs I'd accumulated. She had a key to the new place from day one. Most weekends she stayed over. Some weeks it was more than weekends. One Saturday afternoon, we were sitting on my balcony. The city spread out below us, the sun setting in shades of orange and pink. She leaned against me, my arm around her shoulders. I used to think success meant building something that would outlast me, she said quietly. A company, a legacy, something people would remember. And now, I asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Now I know that what matters most can't be measured in profit margins or market share. She turned to look at me. It's measured in moments like this. In having someone who knows the real you and loves you anyway. In building a life, not just a career. I pulled her closer. 6 months ago, I thought quitting Apex was giving up. That's funny, she said. 6 months ago, I thought losing you from the company was losing you completely. Shows how wrong we both were. We sat there as the sun disappeared and the city lights began to glow. My phone buzzed. My brother, probably checking in like he still did sometimes. But I ignored it. Tomorrow is Monday, Alexandra said. Back to reality. This is reality, I corrected. This right here. Everything else is just details. She laughed and kissed me. You're right. How did I get so lucky to find someone who sees things so clearly? You showed up at my door in the rain. I reminded her. You took the biggest risk of your life. Best decision I ever made. She whispered. Mine too, I said. Letting you in. Life doesn't always turn out how we plan. Sometimes it takes away what we thought we needed. Sometimes doors close hard and loud, leaving us standing in the wreckage wondering what happened. But sometimes, if we're brave enough to stay open to possibility, new doors open. Better ones. Doors we never knew we were looking for. And sometimes the most beautiful beginnings start with the most unexpected words, spoken on a doorstep in the rain by someone brave enough to risk everything for a chance at something real.